Hey guys, welcome back to another video. The Everquest team finally has some more information about the Oakwynd server out. Unless you've been living under a rock, you've probably heard there's been a lot of negative feedback on their first to engage rules and kind of their disconnect with the community. So they have a new post here. Let's see what they have to say. Thank you for the continued feedback regarding the next TLP Oakwynd. We want you to know we hear you and we've been carefully monitoring your comments and suggestions. By no means are we done, so they may potentially make more changes. So please continue to keep it civil and keep it coming. Here is what we've already decided to change based on your feedback. We will change the account lock for Agents of Change instances to be character-based instead of account-based. Okay, so every single character you're going to be able to raid an Agent of Change instance. I mean, that's good, but you still got to level up all the characters. And I don't know if a 10% bonus on each character on the same account is going to give people enough incentive to keep making characters on the same account. No, this rule will be attached to the legacy character rule set. So if a future server gets this, then they will also experience this change as well. So if they move it to live, I don't think that's a huge deal because a lot of the Agents of Change stuff ends in like Gates of Discord for the most part. So getting anything Gates of Discord or earlier on a live server is not really a huge deal. So I think that's fine. We will make it so no drop items that are not free trade no drop will automatically be heirloom items. Okay, so I think what they're saying is any standard item that's typically no drop, that's like raid gear, is going to be an heirloom item instead, but they're not going to do it to like epics and stuff that are no trade on any server no matter what. So if everything is heirloom and they're going to do character-wide lockouts instead of account-wide lockouts on Agents of Change, that's going to allow you to gear up any character on that account really fast, assuming you have enough characters to keep raiding that same raid over and over with other people who also need to level up these alts over and over to raid it multiple times. How many times a week are people going to want to do the same raid over and over? Okay, so let's just keep going here. This does not affect items that are already heirloom. They will remain heirloom. Okay, if a new server is attached to the legacy character rule set, the future server will get this too. So does that mean if I'm on like Burtox or Povar and they move this rule set over there, all no drop items become heirloom items? Is that what that means? We will combine Omens of War and Dragons of Norath to open the same day, okay, within the normal 1 hour gap. This will change for Oakwynd, and there's no change to apply this to Yellowknack. I mean, that's good, but they need to do a lot more combining than that. Like, everything in the level 65 era needs to be sped up. So they said they're going to make more changes, but, you know, it's a start, I guess. But it seems like a really, really minimal conservative start to me. They could have done more than that, I believe. All right, we're also working on a fact specifically based on your questions and feedback about the encounter locking feature. Here is just a small part of what we have so far, and once we have more, we will update you here. Okay, so what is the encounter locking and what is our goal for it? Encounter locking is a feature that will allow the first person that engages an NPC the ability to prevent others from interfering with the fight. A primary goal with adding this feature is to mitigate issues we've seen regarding kill stealing, training, and the early TLP experience before the content becomes more instance-based as the expansion's unlocked. So instead of doing this kill stealing thing, just open up Kunark, guys. Let people have more zones. And obviously it can be toxic in Kunark too, because Chardock is highly contested, but it's better than just having classic. The more zones you have, the more people are going to be spread out by default. And also, instead of confining everybody to these few zones, make some of the zones that have a worse experience rate have a better experience rate. Put some better drops in some of these other zones, or randomize the loot like they did on Mischief. That's actually a pretty good idea. This is not, if their goal is to eliminate kill stealing, really I think in training, to me, it's their goal seems to be eliminate power leveling. I think that's the real hidden thing behind here. And they don't say that. They don't mention power leveling in this article at all, which is really disappointing because that's like a huge factor that people are going to have questions about. So this is not the best. If that's their goal, this is not the best way to go about it. How is this lock applied? The lock is applied to the first player that gets added to an NPC's hate list. This could be via a player attacking the NPC directly or the NPC attacking the player. So if you run around and a bunch of mobs aggro you, they're all locked to you and nobody else can attack them. Like what? How is the lock removed? Or say for instance, you want to lock an epic mob or a PH for an epic mob. You can just hold the mob hostage and no one can get their epic. You can make people say, I want 10,000 platinum. And then I'll unlock this and I'll invite you to my group. At least if like people are fighting against each other, the mob will die. You know, people are going to kill the mob. But if one guy's just holding the NPC hostage, like where does that lead? How is the lock removed? The lock is removed for a short time after the NPC leaves combat. If someone on the lock list attacks the NPC within the period before unlocks, the countdown will reset. So you can basically control when the NPC will unlock just by keep attacking it until it's in a place that's convenient for you. So that's interesting. That's going to cause some grief there. Can members be added to mid-fight to the group or raid? Yes, the lock is owned by an individual player. The group or raid that they currently belong to is the one that owns the lock. Players that are currently in the same group or raid as that player will be able to attack. Those that are not will not be able to attack. So again, this further emphasizes that you can just hold mobs hostage. Will this prevent helping other players? No. If a player would like assistance from someone outside their group, they can target the NPC and use /yell. This will semi-unlock the NPC and allow anyone to attack. What does semi-unlock mean? Once they unlock using yell, the NPC cannot be locked again until it leaves combat and the original lock is removed. So number one, what does semi-unlock mean? And then right here it says unlocked using yell. So it says semi-unlocked using yell and then unlocked using yell. Well, which is it and what does semi-unlocked mean? To me, this means there's going to be some catches if you use this /yell feature. Will there be any changes with how loot or experience is awarded? No, loot and experience will be awarded to the person, group, raid that does the most damage to the NPC. Huh? I thought only one group can do the most damage to the NPC. Are they saying if you lock it and then you decide to unlock it with yell, then it's a race? Like what? I don't understand. This doesn't make any sense. If a player dies while pulling an NPC, can it be locked by someone else immediately, or does it need to be revert back to its spawn point? If an NPC no longer has anyone on its hate list and leaves combat, it will unlock in a short time whether it is at its spawn point or not. So it sounds like once it's not aggroed on anybody, then after a certain period of time it's going to unlock. But my question is like, what about Bard Fade? What about Monk Feign Death? What if you're trying to split mobs? Is it going to like lock and unlock over and over? It says, so let's say you feign death, you lose aggro, because sometimes feign death, you'll lose aggro instantly. Sometimes it's like you won't lose aggro if you get back up. Once it is no longer locked, it can then be locked by anyone, even if the NPC hasn't reached its spawn point. So after a few seconds, you may or may not be able to attack it again, or may not be locked. I think this is going to be a really buggy feature, especially for monks and bards, or anyone who's pulling for that matter, anyone with feign death. So yeah, interesting. How will I know if an NPC is locked to me or someone else? Once an NPC is locked, its name will show as green as if you're able to attack it, or gray if you aren't. These colors will be player editable if the default colors aren't desired. Okay. Will the encounter locking apply to all NPCs, or will there be exceptions? There will be exceptions, and some NPCs will be excluded from the encounter locking feature due to them requiring cooperation amongst different people or being part of events that wouldn't be completable if the NPCs were locked to separate people. Okay, so I would like an example of that. What exactly do they have in mind here? And also, is stuff going to be locked if you're multi-questing an item? Will encounter locking be on the test server before it goes live? Yes, we are planning on enabling encounter locking on the test server in the May test server update. The feature will be turned off on the test server once Oakwynd launches. So they're just going to do a really short test on it on the test server. All right, so what do I think about all this? Well, I made some notes here because I think it's kind of there's a lot of things to consider. So we're going to go over the changes that they want to make, and then we're going to talk about the pros and cons of each one. So the first change is the agents of changes are going to be character-based instead of account-based, and no drop items, basically most no trade items are instead going to be heirloom, so you can trade them between characters on your account. What are the good things about this? Well, potentially, if you put in the work to get all these different alts, you can get more loot for your characters, and also you can gear out your main character faster. Also keep in mind when Kunark is out, they're going to have a 125% extra loot bonus. So you might not need to even do this, make all these extra alts at all. The loot might be super abundant anyway. Next, you can also move the loot between the characters as needed. So for example, you can use your main to gear your alts. If you have a bunch of alts, they're going to be really crappily geared, but you could potentially gear your main through your alts too if you want to get some extra items or just gear up even faster. And lastly, this is kind of a speculation. I think they're trying to encourage people to make more alts here, but is it really going to do that? I might for some people maybe, but I just don't see most people making a bunch of alts just because these rules are in place. To me, it just seems like more work. You have to raid twice as much, and also all these alts you make, they're going to start out with no gear or just whatever leftovers you have from your main. Okay, so what are the cons of this? Well, number one, leveling alts on the same account to gear faster. This is my opinion. It's not fun. I'd rather have a box team or just play one character throughout the TLP. Like, you know, if you're on like a singular account, you can only play one character at a time. Now this, some people do that. That's fine. But I don't know if this is necessarily going to encourage a lot of people to keep making alts over and over, because you have to, number one, you have to level the alt up, and with these encounter locking changes, this power level, it seems like it's going to be nerfed by quite a bit. So depending on what expansion you're in, it might take you a really long time to hit max level. So you're going to have to put a lot of upfront work in even to have these alts. And then once you get to the alts, to do a new raid, you're going to have other people that have to have the alts too, or you're not going to be able to do the raid twice. So, and you're also going to be competing against these other people for the same gear. So you're kind of just recycling the same raids over and over with less gear every new character you do it with. Okay, next is this change does not help people who have a box team unless you level up a whole new alts of box team. So if you have boxed 4 characters, you're gonna have to level up 4 new characters on different accounts to do it again, and if you want to help out your main box of each account, if that makes sense. Also, for every character that you make, you're going to have to re-get the flags again, doing planes of power progression and all that. That's going to be another roadblock that's going to make it less fun to keep playing alts over and over when you have to keep getting all these flags and keys and everything. People who make alts, they're probably already like on the same account. They already do so. Like people, that is a play style that people do like to play alts on the same account, but it's not a huge population of people. Most people won't make an alt until later in the TLP. They're going to be focused on their main character. With no power leveling, this is an assumption, it's going to take even longer to level up any type of alt you make. So every time you level up a new character, it's going to be pretty boring. They're probably going to be under geared until you like really do it, unless you're really doing this a lot over a bunch of different characters. So it's going to be a lot of upfront work for anybody who's looking to make an alt. And a lot of players, they have no problems leveling up the first time, but for alts, they want to get power level because nobody wants to do it the slow way over and over and over. And the more expansions that get released, the more this is going to become a problem because you got more of a gap to close, and you'll have less people in each zone to have a typical group with the more expansions that are out on the TLP. Also, this EXP change, I think it's good. For the alts and everything, but it needs to be on all servers. It should not just be on this new TLP. I don't know why they're testing it on this TLP. Just put the experience bonus on all the servers. That's where you're going to see the most benefit. Put it on live servers or long-standing TLPs. Those are the servers that really need it. And then, so number 2, the next change they did here is Omens of War and Dragons of Norath are now combined. They'll come out the same day. The pros of that, well, Omens of War and Dragons of Norath are now combined. So that's great. However, the cons is Number one, I think it needs to be done on more expansions, like the Planes of Power-ish era. If you look down here, Planes of Power through Eldon is basically 16 weeks. That's 4 months of level 65 content. And that's before Gates of Discord is even out. You're going to be, if you include Gates of Discord, it's 24 weeks of level 65 content. That's way too long. They need to combine more of these. Also, the release schedule is just too low. Omens of War isn't going to be out for over a year. So Classic, you got 8 weeks, Kunark 8, Velus 8, Luckland 8, Planes of Power through Eldon is 16, and Gates of Discord is another 8 weeks. So it's not going to be 56 weeks into the server until we even see Omens of War. By then, another TLP, in theory, is going to be out next year. And who cares if you're combining these two expansions when, at this point, everyone's probably quit already anyway, or they're just playing on another server and they weren't going to come over here to begin with. Okay, so up next is the first to engage rules. They didn't really change anything here. They provided a little clarification, but not really that much. First to engage, also known as encounter locking. So what are the pros of this? Well, they say it's to prevent kill stealing and training. That's what they say, like one of the main reasons they're doing this is, and which doesn't make any sense because there's a lot of other ways that you can go about doing this without changing the core mechanics. So for the cons, it's going to be just as easy, if not easier, to grief somebody by holding mobs hostage. Let's say there's an epic mob or a PH. All you gotta do is tag it, take it to some corner of the zone. People aren't even going to realize it's gone until way after like the respawn timer's up. They're going to go, wait, well, why is the PH not spawning? They might go find some other person in the zone. They're like, well, this guy's holding the mob hostage. He's just standing over here in the corner of the zone with the mob. So this is going to create a lot more griefing scenarios than really exists right now. It's going to create a whole new rope. This is going to change it from one problem to another problem. So you can basically, you can just instant tag a mob. Also, you can, like if wizards have Staff of Temporal Flux, you just cast that on them, on whatever you want, and boom, you have the mob tagged and nobody can do anything about it. The second one is, this seems like it's going to nerf power level. I think this is like the real reason behind doing this, or at least one of the reasons. They don't even bring it up in their announcement today. They didn't say anything about power leveling at all. But so we don't know if it's going to be nerfed or not, but it seems like it is. So based on how the mechanics are shown to us, you're not going to be able to mass power level anymore, which I agree. Like nobody should be taking over a whole zone and griefing and all that stuff. But there's other ways to prevent people from doing that rather than making this weird mechanic change that could potentially eventually affect everybody in the game on all servers. So I think them nerfing power level is a real reason behind this. They just don't want to admit it because they know it's going to create even more backlash, but they haven't said anything. So I could be wrong here on this, but we're just going to have to wait and see. But I think this is going to be a huge con if they nerf this. Next we have, how is this first to engage going to interact with feign death and fade mechanics? I think there's going to be a lot of room for exploits there. There's going to be a lot of room for bugs there. Another thing I don't like about first to engage is it's going to further slow down the gameplay. The game's already slow enough. Everquest doesn't need to be any slower. If somebody runs by a mob and that you were going to tag, and now it's locked to them and you can't tag it, that's just going to make it even more irritating to pull mobs as the puller, and it's going to slow down the gameplay even more. Especially if you have to wait for the mob to reset and all these different weird mechanics that they're trying to put in here. Everquest is slow enough. It doesn't need to be any slower. If anything, the game needs to be sped up. So this /yell system, so it supposedly if you have a mob blocked to you, you type /yell, it will like semi-unlock the mob so other people can attack it. So they're saying, well, if you're in a bad situation, you can unlock the mob this way. Like this is just goofy. Like the game right now, if you're in a bad situation, somebody could help you potentially, but most of the time you're either running to the zone in, or you're trying to push buttons to save yourself. You're not like typing /yell or have a hotkey. Oh, /yell. Hopefully some guy comes by and saves me and they saw my /yell emote. Guys, the mob's unlocked. Please come help. Like that's not going to, very unrealistic that that's going to happen. So just this whole encounter lock thing, it's just a goofy idea. I don't know what's going on or why they put in a /yell, and they're trying to make up all these weird use case scenarios for these different commands, but the commands don't really help that much, and when the encounter shouldn't be locked to begin with. All right, so moving on to the next one. It's just not fun. There's nothing fun about adding this encounter locking system. If anything, it's going to make the game less fun. The game needs to be fun, and it doesn't need to be slowed down anymore. The game is plenty slow. All right, lastly, why is there not a second server? This whole thing here, I've said it a million times, this needs to be its own server rule set. They can test this out if they want, but they need to make a new TLP server that's actually fun for everybody, that people like to do. And trying to like go back on this, make all these retroactive changes and saying, oh, we're keeping the first to engage, but you know, we'll throw you some bones up here with AOC and the heirloom loot and all this weird stuff. But you know, you can make all these alts, but you got to get them flagged. You got to level them up the slow, boring way. Like, what's their direction here? What are they trying to do? Just make a new server, make it fun, and put this crap on a second server. That's it. That's all I got to say. See you in the next one. Bye.